Hispanics make up 23. So we see that we are statistically ahead of where those demographic numbers are. We also, last year, our numbers went up in those two classes by 5%. I'm expecting, and I'm saying tonight, that I predict that we're going to do double-digit increases next year at the same time. I would not be surprised if we did not do that. Gender, something that's happening in gender in ELA. We have a joke in the C&I department. We say that girls just do school better than boys do. And so in other words, they just come to school and they just do what they need to do a whole lot better. I don't know if Kathy would agree with that. You agree with that? So the girls do. But we see in gender, we see in the ELA that the females outscored the males. Not a great statistical difference, but they start, and it kept going all the way through. We saw that, for example, in the elementary school, they were 61% proficient. At the middle school, 61% proficient. And at the high school, they were 57%. So they just stayed across the board. They stayed in the same place. So we can see there. You can dig down into this, on when you get there. But we're looking at certain trends, and so we're watching certain things, and we're seeing a trend in males and females, as well as a trend in ethnic groups. The trend that we're seeing is that we're seeing an increase in, because historically the males have outscored the females in science and in math. There's a reversal that we're beginning to see on that as well. So that's interesting. That's changing. Mathematics, again, we're proud to say, look what we did to the state. So the state's numbers are here in red. Our numbers are in red. The state is in black. We outperformed the state again in mathematics. So if you see in grade 6, I'm really proud of this. In grade 6, and I'm excited about this too, in grade 6 you will see that essentially we are like statistically around the same place. In grade 7, we're basically just the same. So in grade 6 and 7, they didn't really, even though we didn't outscore them, statistically we're basically tied in the same place. So we're proud and we're happy about the scores that we're seeing there. We did a real good job in mathematics as well. Mm-hmm. If we move here is where some concern is becoming, as we're looking at. In the subgroup of race, we see that the African American and Latino scores are not where they need to be in math. So we see something happening there in math, and we put some interventions in place to look at that. So if you notice, with the black and it starts going down. So we see in the elementary school, we see that look what happened between the elementary school and the middle school. So there is a drop in the demographics between the elementary and the middle school. So we were trying to figure out what is causing that drop, what caused that. One of the things that we did when we wrote curriculum is that we started pushing certain skills from the middle school down, because we're thinking that what happens is that when they get there, and we start identifying students. We did move the Math Potential program, we changed that, and we sunset the Math Potential program. We're looking at other ways that we can actually serve the population, and through tutorial programs, but we're looking at ways to see how can we compensate for that loss that we see happening there in the middle school in mathematics.
Dr. Baskerville,
Yes, sir.
In the past, one of the concerns was the transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. And when we did that study, remember, does this monitor at all like their organizational skills? A lot of the kids, what they said is that was part of just them being ready to do the math. It's just their being organized.
There's been a constant change over the years in the standards and the expectations in the transition grades in math. Mm-hmm. So it started years ago with certain things like ratios and proportions that were taught in elementary school or kicked up to, they would have them on the standardized test, but the scope and sequence put it at the end of the year, or they start kicking it up to grade 4. So what we see, and what our focus in curriculum writing was over this past summer, was the transition grades, because we said, and Becky Dayton and Frank Robleski did a good job of looking at how we need to put certain skills down, and it happens at the high school with algebra. So a lot of things in the high school in algebra, we find that if we just wait till kids hit a certain grade, so we start pushing skills down from grade 4 to grade 3. transition grade. We start pushing skills down from grade 8 to grade, from 9 to 8, and we start pushing things down from 5 to 6. So we're looking at, so when kids get to there, it's kind of like we had this thing called sneak peek years ago, but what we did was we actually embedded into the curriculum, what the curriculum, the objectives and the standards, we give us some wiggle room when we start pushing skills down to those transition grades. The scores show that those other places, not only us, but other places too, in the transition grades, that's where things seem to happen. That's where all of the things seem to happen between those. It happens in science. It really, and that's why we went to the integrated science model. So it's a lot of places where we're beginning to see that at. It's more of a curricular thing than a developmental issue. So we see that because many times we thought it was, and it's partly both, but it has something to do with the curriculum. And so we say, well, let's make the adjustments where we can, and when curriculum by doing that.
Bill, if I could add, I think we've taken steps also to make kids feel comfortable when they go from building to building. That's a big part of this, right? The comfort when they're in the four walls. A lot of kids can't transition to a new principal, new rules, new teacher, new way of doing things. A new building, things like that. So when their mind is taken up by that, it's difficult for them to concentrate on this. So we've done a lot of visitations. We've done a lot of principals opening the buildings to families, and even if it's not on a large scale basis. So we try to take into consideration that as well, which definitely affects. I know this isn't a presentation on that, but it definitely affects all of us.
Absolutely. Dr.
Yeah,
Vasco,
yeah.
a question for you in terms of the supports, the additional supports. So once you have this data by, demographic, by gender, but then honing down and taking a look at those specific students who lend to these numbers, the additional supports that they get and the amenities that are available to them, the programs and services that we have, I'm sure are very robust in terms of tutoring, after school, right? So a lot of that will lend to
100%.
right,
Yes.
bringing these scores up. Interventions.
Yeah, one of the things that the state also requires now to do is that in this presentation, we are required to list just some of the interventions that are taking place in the district. So toward the end, you will see the interventions that we have in place to do those type of things. In Lincoln, our data warehousing system, we can actually go into Lincoln and pull up these kids who were actually, the ones who were the 19% or the 20%, we know exactly who those kids are. And so then we could differentiate and tell instruction, concise instruction. I'm happy to say that this year, since I've been in this role, we are doing more data-informed instruction than I've seen since I've been in this position. So we're really moving now. We're being data-driven and data analysis. As a matter of fact, the coaches were here today doing that. So it's really digging in to just tell instruction to, because the only way we're going to do this is that it cannot be done on a one-size-fits-all. Right. It has to be tailored and moved down. And as you know, we've learned from our people who have been doing this for years, and those other teachers who are in special education, they have been differentiated instruction forever. And so we've learned how to do that as well.
Very good, thank you.
Just with the math, the way that the previous chart is laid out is by grade, and it says Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, whatever. What population is taking accelerated like Algebra 1 and Geometry in the 8th grade?
You mean as far as the demographic is concerned? Or just the students who take this, for example, we can hear, if you take the actual New Jersey report, and the reports that we get, we can actually go down and see where the kids are, what grade they're in, the 8th graders, as well as, so any student who's enrolled in Algebra 1, whether they're in middle school or high school, they're in this data. Did I ask them? Are you looking for the ethnicity or?
Just that in the past, that sometimes the geometry expectation was exceeded because it's really the accelerated kids down in the 8th grade.
And we're going to see that.
Boosting it up. It's not the kids in the high school.
And we're going to see some of that too, because you're going to see in certain places. If you look at this, for example, in mathematics, you will see less than 10. So if you see over in the exceeding expectation section, you'll see, because it's a subgroup less than 20, so they put less than 10 because it's less than 10% of the population that actually met that criteria.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I meant, like the weighting. It's
Yeah.
some of that grade, the geometry is weighted by the accelerated kids down in the 8th grade.
Science. Again, here we look at in grade 11. We can see our science numbers we're looking at, and this is why we're moving to the integrated science model. We're in our second year of that. Next year will be in our third year. So at the end of next year, that means that every kid going to the high school will have an integrated science model in middle school, which means that we found that what happened in science is that the fifth graders normally do better in science than many times than the sixth graders did, because the fifth graders are used to an integrated science model, where it starts breaking down when you get to middle school. It used to be you had life science one year, physical science one year, earth science another year. We've changed that now, where we have all three each year. So when the students in the fifth grade, they were used to seeing that, so when you get to grade 6 and you're taking a standardized test, the sixth graders are used to seeing it, but in 7 it starts falling off. So we're going to see where we're going to really get to where we need to. We knew it would take us 3 years to get there, so we're beginning to see the benefits of that coming forward with the science scores. But you see here, we outperform the state in grade 11, and in all grades we outperform the state again. Here again we see science. And this is teeny weeny, but you can look on your sheets and you can see that. One of the things that we look at is we look at in science the number of, there is a disproportionality. The greatest disproportionality exists in science. And so we can see that in the amount of students who are even taking certain science classes, and we can see the disproportionality in the actual scores that we get on science. So if you look over, for example, you can see coming back across, if you look at just in grade 5, or better yet, go to grade 11. If you go to grade 11, you'll see how it goes from the largest group performing in science go from 38 and 23. Next, it goes down to the African American and Hispanic to 19 and 2 and 13 and 2. The numbers there, that's the widest place that we see disproportionality within our district in the curriculum is in science. And so we're figuring how to, I spoke to Dr. Jeff Sullivan today, spoke to Jeff Pritchett. We think that another one of the things, the integrated science model, is helping with that because of interest. Many of them are interested in one science but not another. So when you have all three, and you're shaking yourself. Yeah. And so we see that if they have all three all the time, it piques the interest and it keeps them going in that direction. But that's where we see the widest gap in our student performances in science.
Dr. Baskerville?
Yes, ma'am.
One comment that I noticed, kind of an overarching thing that I've seen, and it's very encouraging, is that for the young ladies who have presented now over the student presentations, which we have the benefit of seeing once again in person, we've missed very much. They mean a lot, I think, to all of us. But from the young ladies who presented from Arbor, where they were talking about fish and fishing,
Yes.
to the young lady who was just talking about wanting to be an astronaut.
Yes.
There's an overarching theme of young ladies, and there were a few other presentations where I noticed that science is coming through very, very strong in many different facets. So it's encouraging to
Yes.
see that that's, kind of spurring interests throughout the females.
Another thing that we did was we changed the resources that we use in science in the elementary school. So we actually went to mystery science kits. That has made a world of a difference too, because we have the actual resources to match the curriculum. And so teachers now have, and the kids are excited about that. So we've sparked that interest and love in the elementary schools, and we're looking at possibly expanding that up through the grade level for the next year in the budget process.
Just a
Yes,
side question. I noticed, and so the NJSLA is testing 5, 8, 11, but Stark Strong in Science this year tested, was it 6?
Same thing.
I thought, because I teach 6, I thought.
6, 9, and 12.
Yeah, it changed the band of who they were testing,
Yeah,
this
because
year.
Star Strong is the previous year.
Right.
So in order to get the 5, they test in 6th grade.
But at Kim's point, it's good that we invested some money in getting the planetarium up and running again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
the GPA Graduate Proficiency Assessment. Another good thing we notice on this, we see that the state, we look at the two categories here, and that is being graduation ready. That is the major thing that the GPA is looking at. And if we notice that the state graduation ready rate at the state right there is 39.4, we again exceeded the state with graduation readiness of 46.3. So we exceeded the state even with that on a field test the first time we did this, and we exceeded the expectations. We even did better there. So we are very happy to see that. Females and males, if we look at the graduation ready rate down here, then we see another trend, as we were saying. We see that the females were 58.6 and the males were 35.6. So we see something going on there. But we're looking at that, and we're going to come back. I'm going to show you another thing in a second of how we're actually digging down and seeing exactly where that's coming at.
Dr. B?
Yes, ma'am.
Were these scores released to parents of students who took this field test?
Yes.
They were.
Yes. We had individual score reports. The parents did get them. We were required by law to get paper tests and mail them to them. That went out a couple of weeks ago. And that's the second page here of the GPA, which just lets us know how the English language learners, we had none, and our migrant students, we had none. So that's where that page is. Following page is math. Again, proud again to say that we outperformed the state of New Jersey. State was at 49.5. We were at 53.2. So we outperformed the state again for the GPA and mathematics. Okay, let me go there, yeah. This is here is what we call evidence statements. They were confidential, but the state released them on Monday. So they were confidential, they were embargoed. They were received by the state on Monday. I spoke to them, they said that you can pull them confidential, do not distribute, monitor off of them, but you can use them for board purposes within the district. The thing that we see here, Piscataway is in the green, the state is in the blue. At the bottom is every standard that's tested. I didn't put the second page on here because it's a glossary to that. But that glossary lists what each one of these standards are. And here we'll see where we are and where the state is. So what we do is these are the score, and the actual questions on here, and it's from order of difficulty from the most to the least. So the most difficult is over here, and the least difficult, it goes from the most difficult to the least. It lists all the questions that are given here in these evidence statements. If you notice, what we do is we look at here, and the supervisors and the teachers drill down into where these things are. So for example, we see over here, this is something that's easy, and these are the more difficult things. So we see even on the more difficult how well we scored here on the more difficult things. So what we try to do is we try to look at how to improve in those areas. So we know what those areas are. We have in the acceleration guide, we've uploaded this, we have this. We have sample of released items and test questions that you can put, and the teachers use this to help target instruction as well. ELL, there were 543 ELs in 2021-22 academic year. Our numbers of ELs are increasing. Of the 543, 433 ELs took access testing in the spring. In 2022, access was an in-person assessment. And one of the reasons why our L's grew is because in order for you to exit a student from L, you have to exit them in person. So when we were in virtual, the numbers grew. We were not able to exit them from the program. So here we are with the amount of kids. We have 543, 433 took the access in 2022. Of the 433, 61 achieved a 4.5 or higher. In order to exit the L program, you must have a 4.5 and other measures to exit the program. And that is, so we're moving in that direction too. Here is the framework for ELL, the WIDA framework. And this is very interesting because you see the 5 levels of WIDA. we got to look at here is where we look at pulling the students out of the ELL program. If they have to hit a 4.5, these are the 5 levels. Right here, typical kindergarten, we see that in kindergarten, that most of the kids are, when they took the WIDA, this is where they scored. And we notice when we look at, that's very beginning, the basic, internal. So what they are doing, it does not mean this is when they entered, it means that when they took the test, this is what they scored. So they scored entering level, and you can see that you want to move them from entering to emerging and developing. But
Now,
look what
just forgive me, what does WIDA mean, or WIDA is an acronym for something?
It's,
Whatever. What is WIDA?
world, it's something, that's new.
I got you.
Restaurant alone be trying to.
So we see here, look what happens in grade 1. And these are essentially the students that we have sitting in our ELL classes. You see that? In grade 1, you see the blue decreases,
Yeah.
and the emerging and developing increases. And that's what you want. You want to see that go down, this go up. Look what's happening here. And you even see some students start hitting bridging. Four and 5, look at that. 6 through 8. A lot of people ask the question, why do we see in grade 6 that we see that go that way? And the answer to that is because we had a high influx of L at that level. So, order, and not only where we had students moving forward, but we had a lot of students that came into the district in the middle school that needed services. High school. DLM. These are for students who could not take the NJSLA. And so this is the dynamic learning map. These students took that assessment. And what we see here is that the assessment took place, there's something called essential elements in the DLM, where the students who have IEPs and cannot take the regular NJSLA, they have something called essential elements that essentially capsulize what the standards are for them on their level. So they were tested in essential elements. We see the DLM took place in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 11, and in science in 5, 8, and 11. In the spring of 2022, we tested 1.3% of the students in our district. We are only allowed to test 1% of our students. So if we test more than 1% of our students, we have to write the state to give them a rationale of why we have to test more. The reason why we tested more students than the 1% is because of our autistic population is beginning to move forward. And they're beginning to move forward and qualify for the DLM. And we have a large sector of autistic students that made us go beyond the 1% till we had to test. And that's where the 1.3 came from. And again this year, for that reason, we have to put in another rationale again this year because we're going to be again at about 1.3 when it comes to tech access testing. Grade 4, we see some of the highlights we see is that in grade 4 and 5 in ELA, at or advanced 10% and 7%